Hello, everyone, wherever you may be. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is my pleasure to be on stage today with a very special guest from Lagos, Nigeria. And if you're wondering what's behind me, at my backdrop, that is actually Lagos, Nigeria. I wanted everyone to see the beauty that exists in that part of the world, which I am very proud to call my homeland. Here at Integrative Ruminations, what we try to do is just simply to analyze problems and create awareness. So, what we are trying to do in this space is to seek to explore the social issues that confront our world and us who live in it, and find ways to make us all healthier and better custodians of the world that we were blessed to inhabit. This is my life's course, and I hope that it is evident in what I try to do through Ruminations blog, the podcast Ruminations with our hero Oni-Eseleh, our international conferences and webinars, and the kind of work that brings us all here today. In seeking to analyze problems and create awareness, I am cognizant that none of what we do in this space is possible without the participation and encouragement of others. People like you who have joined us here today from across the United States, Canada, Nigeria, Ghana, and the United Kingdom. I thank you all. My guest today is Fumto Ogunbamwo. Born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria, she is passionate about dispelling the myths and stereotypes around mental health in Africa. She is a graduate of Austin College and Southern Methodist University in Texas, USA. She is the founder of Ibiayo Therapy and Wellness in Lagos, Nigeria. And she also runs a blog called Out of the Hurt, which is dedicated to exploring mental health, faith, young adulthood, and overall well-being. She's a nationally certified counselor in the United States and has experience providing services across different settings, such as partial hospitalization settings, residential treatment centers, and outpatient treatment facilities. She has also had the opportunity to work with organizations such as Google for Startups Africa, Leadway Pension, Impact Hub Lagos, Zcrest Capital, and many more, but where she has offered consulting services and workshops focused on attaining maximum wellness for the organizations at large. Her bachelor's degree is in psychology and communication from Austin College, and her master's degree is in clinical mental health counseling. Of course, I already indicated from SMU. She practices from a trauma-focused lens, and her goals in doing a psychotherapy is to provide individuals with a safe, non-judgmental, and collaborative environment that allows for insight, healing of hurts, and discovering the strengths that lie within. So, Ms. Ogunbamwo, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introduction. I haven't heard Out of the Heart in so long, so it was nice to hear it.
So, what I'm going to do is actually just have you speak to us about the work that you do.
Mhm.
It is important because not so many of us, even those of us who were born in Nigeria and who live here in the United States, think that there's an established way, an established psychotherapy practice in Nigeria. Even though we know that it's really needed, we don't know that it's desired. So, what I like to do is to just give you some time to talk to us about yourself and what you are doing.
All right, awesome. Happy to do that. Thank you so much. Thank you again for the introduction, and thank you for having me. So my name is Fumto Ogunbamwo, as has been introduced. I am a clinical mental health therapist or a clinical psychotherapist and the lead therapist of Ibio Therapy and Wellness. That's our logo behind us. Ibio is a private psychotherapy clinic, and we offer therapy services to those that are seeking support. We offer therapy services to adolescents, adults, and couples as well as corporations. Some of our areas of specialization include depression, anxiety, life transition, neurodevelopmental concerns, and other mental health related issues. So I often get asked how I found my way into the world of psychotherapy and psychology as a whole. And the story goes back to when I was in 11th grade, or for those of us that were in the Nigerian education system, SS2. So I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. I did both my primary, which is elementary school, and high school and secondary school in Lagos. So the high school that I attended, we in 11th grade, we had the opportunity to have a mini internship where we could get real world experience just to help us understand and discover our career paths. So my dad is a journalist and I look like him. I get told that I look like him. And oftentimes I would be told that, oh, because I look like my dad, I should go study journalism. And I don't know how looks translates into a career, but so this informed the internship that I had. I interned at a radio station. I really enjoyed it. However, it was really hard for me to think about, to envision doing this in the long term, to envision me doing this as a long time career. So when after the internship was over, I then started to ask myself questions like, okay, what do I like doing? What comes to me naturally? And I discovered that I really enjoyed talking to people. I mean, in my friend group, I was often the one that people would seek out for advice. And so I decided to study psychology. Now, psychology is not a very accepted or popular field to study in Nigeria, but thankfully, my parents are super supportive. They never imposed any of the typical Nigerian parent stereotypes on either myself or my siblings. We all had free creative freedom to decide what we wanted to study. So once I told them that I wanted to study psychology, they were very supportive. There were no pushbacks, so I decided to study psychology. I got my psychology degree. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from Austin College in Sherman, Texas. And then I went on to get my master's in clinical mental health counseling, as was stated previously. While I was getting both my bachelor's and my psychology and my master's degree, I really started to see the discrepancy that existed between mental health care in America and in Nigeria. And also within America, I started to see the discrepancy that also existed within the Black community. So I really wanted to do something about that. And I made it a long time, I made it a professional goal of mine to be able to establish my practice in Nigeria. However, I thought that was going to be a long-term goal. I thought it was going to be something that would happen 10, 15 years into my career. But life happened the way it did, and I started IBIO in 2021, and it's been an amazing journey. One of the biggest lessons that I have learned since starting EPIO and since working in a landscape where mental health is still being talked about, where psychotherapy services are still being introduced, is the importance of speaking people's languages. And what I mean by that is I don't even mean dialects, right? So, of course, being able to speak a dialect that is understandable to the receiver is also important. But what I mean is presenting information in a way that can be received by the receiver of the information. So, as a professional, there's already a there's already a difference in hierarchy in that, people think that you're the professional and that you know everything. And so it's really important for me to have a collaborative environment where the clients feel like they are also a part of this therapeutic process and that they are the experts of their story, and I'm just there to support them. So with speaking a language that people can understand, something that I've learned is the importance of meeting people where they're at. So some people may not know what therapy entails. So having to do a lot of psychoeducation around that. But then even just the basic counseling skills or the basic therapy skills of active listening, empathy, validation, rephrasing, those basic skills are really the core tenets of the practice. And so I often like to encourage our therapists that work at ABIO and also myself to really lean in on some of those on to really lean in on those skills, right? Because in a landscape like Nigeria, where we don't have a lot of psychotherapy services, or we're just starting to have a lot of psychotherapy services, people don't always encounter a space where they can feel heard, where they can feel listened to, and feel listened to without any judgment. So it's really important to be able to speak people's languages. Another way that I like to encourage speaking people's languages, or that I employ speaking people's languages, is analogies, right? So psychoeducation, I've learned that if you're throwing a bunch of psychological jargon at people, it's going to fly over their heads, right? So it's really important to be able to use analogies that are understandable to people. So, as was introduced, I practice from a trauma focused lens. And so, when I'm trying to explain the impact that trauma may have, especially if untreated, I like to use the example of an accident. So, the example that I use for my clients is this: imagine that you're in an accident. Imagine that there's an accident that occurs, and the person that is in the accident has difficulties afterwards. So if they get around a car, they might start hyperventilating, or it might be a while before they can get back into a car and they just feel unsafe. How would you react to that person? And oftentimes, my clients would say things like, oh, they would be patient, or they would understand why that person may be having such a reaction. And so that can then lead into a conversation around trauma and just the impact that trauma can have on us, especially those childhood traumas that usually go untreated, or even um, or even unrecognized in a society like Nigeria. And then, of course, just having basic themes like asking for the well-being of people, encouraging things like vulnerability. I mean, our society isn't one that really encourages vulnerability. So encouraging people that come into the therapy space to practice vulnerability with themselves and also people around them. So those are just some of the things that I've learned in my practice as a therapist in Nigeria, in navigating a climate where mental health is still being received. It's very important to be humble, so to not come across as I know it all. And then it's also important to speak the people's languages. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the rest of this conversation, and I hope it's helpful for everyone.
Oh my God. I first of all, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. And let me tell you, while you were speaking, I got a text message from someone who grew up in Texas, lives in Atlanta, but grew up in Texas, and said, I like your guest. She's a Mustang from SMU.
Yes, Tony up.
Right. Well, I guess that's what in Nigeria they'll call parakwa,
Yes,
right?
purple. Yes, exactly.
But I have invited Dr. Olushola Togun Butler to join me in facilitating this discussion with you, Mr. Ogunbamwo. Dr. Togun Butler has a PhD in education from North Central University and a master's degree in social work from Silverman School of Social Work. She also has a bachelor's degree in psychology, like you, from Brooklyn College. She's a licensed clinical social worker in the state of New York, New Jersey, and Ohio, and provides individual, couple, and family therapy to adults and adolescents in New York. And she also does telehealth therapy, live video sessions in the state of New York, New Jersey, and Ohio. She, like you, is a is a clinical trauma specialist and a certified therapist in dialectic behavior therapy. She's also a member of New York City Cognitive Behavior Therapy Association. And I am also really fascinated by her because of one of the books that she wrote, which is called Where Do You Keep the Lions? An African Girl's First Day of School in America. It's a children's book that really was received very widely. And I think you were actually a guest, Shola, on NBC television a few years ago.
Yes,
Right? So,
I was.
and the good thing about this is that I am excited on many levels, and to see that three African-born psychotherapists are sharing space today to talk about this very important work that you do. And so I think that I am going to ask the first question. And, it has to do with when you decided, you've told us when and why you decided to practice in Nigeria. Was it a difficult decision for you to make? And how has the transition been?
So it wasn't a difficult decision in that, like I said, it was always a long time goal of mine. It was something that I had always wanted to do. I would say that what was difficult, what was the most difficult thing about the transition was just the way that it happened, right? So it wasn't something that I went into. My move back to Lagos happened quite suddenly. So it wasn't something that like I pre-planned ahead to do, right? So the move back to Lagos happened, and then I kind of just found myself not doing anything. And my sister was like, "Why don't you start your own practice?" And I was like, "No, I'm okay. I'm good. I don't think that I'm supposed to do that now." But then I gave it some more thoughts and, just did my research, did everything that I had to do from a legal perspective. And I just did everything that I needed to do. So it wasn't a hard decision, like I said, because I wanted to, it was always something that I wanted to do. It was just the how that I, didn't pre-plan for. So, yeah.
Wow. So, Shala, I'm going to have you ask the next question of our guest.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I really enjoyed your presentation and the fact that you're very client-centered. That's very important, where it's a collaboration instead of an expert-client relationship. It's more of a collaboration. So the question that I have is, in what areas of practice do you specialize?
Yes. So I personally specialize in depression, anxiety, trauma-related concerns, and life transitions. So at my practice, we also specialize in areas like that, but then we also have clinicians that specialize in neurodevelopmental disorders, personality disorders, career-related issues, and of course, couples therapy too. So with my areas of specializations, those have really been informed by the type of clients that I've seen and just the areas, the different settings that I've worked in. So, as was mentioned, I've worked in intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization. So, to be specific, I worked with at-risk youth. So, youth who were in the custody of CPS. So, of course, there was a lot of trauma with that. And then in the IOP and PHP setting, I worked with youth again, but the youth where their mental health had, really reached a point where their parents were concerned for their safety. So we were like the step in between going to a psychiatric hospital. So with that, there was a lot of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and also trauma. So those experiences really helped me hone in on what I want to, just specialize in and practice. And of course, since coming back to Lagos and starting my practice, we see a lot of anxiety and depression related concerns. I do see trauma related concerns, and I mean that might just be because I always have my trauma lens on. I'm always thinking like, okay, what happened? And so
Yes.
people might not come in saying, oh, I have a lot of trauma, but as we go along the journey of therapy together, we discover that there was trauma that happened maybe in childhood, especially in childhood, or even like, early adulthood. So those are just some of my areas of specialization.
Oh, thank you. Great response.
Yeah, will it be appropriate then to think of Nigeria, indeed much of Africa, because one of the things that you're trying to do is to break those myths that have to do with psychotherapy and mental illness and wellness across the African continent. So my question, consider the fact that you operate from a trauma focused lens. Would it be appropriate to say that much of the Nigerian society or the African society is traumatized right now? Therefore, for someone like you, this is a lot of work on your plate.
Yes, I think it would be appropriate to say, right? So whether the trauma comes from experiences that they've had in life, so whether there's been like abuse that has occurred in childhood or adulthood, or even just trauma that's occurring as it relates to the environment, right? So I think of individuals like myself that live in Lagos. It's very high stress. It's a bustling city. I mean, it's December in Lagos. There's a lot of traffic. People are spending 2 to 3 hours in traffic, right? And there's just a lot of stress, right? So while an individual like that may not be traumatized, they're definitely in an environment that is bringing up some of those trauma responses to the surface. And these are daily experiences that are happening. So I would say that, yes, it's very fair to say that a lot of the African population has experienced one form of trauma or the other, and there are a lot of those trauma responses that are happening on a daily basis. And yes, there's a lot on the plates of individuals like myself and practitioners like myself that are having to support people. But I'm very honored to be able to support the people that I do.
Right. Dr. Togun Butler, before you ask the next question, let me say that one of the things that I didn't say was that we are being watched, because this is being live streamed across the platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We have a question from LinkedIn. The question is, it says, thanks for sharing and complementing the use of cultural perspective for trauma-informed care. My question is, how have you been able to navigate the imperfect insurance systems with a level of poverty and payment for services in Nigeria? That's a question from LinkedIn.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that question. And that is a great question. And I'll be honest, it's still something that we are having to navigate. So, unfortunately, in Nigeria, healthcare is still a privilege. And that also cuts across to mental health, too. So people may not be able to afford mental health services or even physical health services because, like was mentioned, the level of poverty. So there are insurance companies, and some mental health providers accept those insurance. We call them HMO in Nigeria. So some mental health providers accept HMO payments, but then I've also been told that, I mean, just like with insurance in the US as well, with accepting insurance in the US, there are a lot of like loopholes, or, the payment process is a bit slower for the practitioner. So we internally at TBIO try to have events or just community outreaches where we can give back to the community. So we offer pro bono therapy services to those who can't afford our services. We also offer sliding scale on an as needed basis. And then something that we did just help improve the mental health landscape and to pour into future professionals was we had a webinar a few months ago on it was called Journey to Psych. So it was myself and three other individuals that have psychology degrees across different experiences, and it was free for all to attend, just to help people that are trying to study psychology get more information on what a journey in psychology can look like, what an education in psychology can look like. So we have our own way of giving back to the community. There are other mental health services that provide either free counseling or they provide it at a limited at a lowered cost. So if we ever encounter a client that is unable to afford our full services, we're always more than happy to just refer and provide them with resources that might be beneficial for them.
Thank you.
I was going to say thank you so much for that, because again, what you're expressing is trying to make mental health services accessible and affordable for those who need it. And my question has to do with the area of the mental health stigma. So I grew up initially in Ibadan, Nigeria. My dad was a psychiatrist at the time, so he talked very openly about mental health and very openly about some of the stigma, in Nigerian society around mental health, to the point where people might be reluctant to come forward if they're dealing with mental health issues. So I just wanted to ask you the question in terms of what are some of the stigma in Nigerian society when it comes to accessing mental health services, and how are you working to maybe destigmatize mental health?
Yeah, that's really amazing to hear that your dad was a psychiatrist. Yeah, so those stigmas definitely still do exist. I mean, a stigma that is very popularized or that still exists is mental health issues being co-linked to spiritual issues. So either like your village people are chasing you, or something bad is happening to you, or you did something wrong, right? So we still have some of those. I mean, it's starting to go away, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So one of the ways that we try to work around those stigmas is, like I kind of said in my presentation, is being able to meet people where they're at. So if people are not ready to engage with therapy, depending on where it is that we're providing a service, we might just strike up a conversation, just asking them how they're doing, asking about things like their sleep, asking about like the economic stressors that they might be experiencing. So we had the opportunity to provide like wellness services at an event, and it was very interesting to see because it was an event that was themed like a healthy party. And it was very interesting to see how people engaged with our services there, because there were some individuals that were like, oh yeah, I'm open to talking. And then there were still some individuals that were like, I don't need therapy, or I don't need to talk to a therapist. So we still have some of those we still have that resistance. And, it's a fine line of not forcing people, but also still educating people on like, okay, therapy is not a scary thing, right? And at that event, for example, the people that were hesitant, we just struck up a conversation, asking how their day was going, asking about like how they were navigating the stressors of the society and things like that. So being able to speak people's languages, being able to just strike up a one-on-one conversation is one of the ways that we just try to get around those stereotypes, and also just psychoeducating people on what therapy is, the benefits of therapy, and things like that.
Yes, I like that. It continues to be client-centered. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also what we call in social work meeting the client where the client is.
Yes.
And there's this whole concept, some will call it theory, of the person and environment. And I personally, it's what you have just described is actually one of the reasons why I focus so much. And when I talk to my students, I talk a lot about psychosocial theory, which talks about looking at the individual's environment or family, and the interaction between the individual and their environment. And I think that as you and Dr. Togun Butler will agree, those elements are very, very consistent in helping us understand the person that we're working with. It's really that's really what the entire theory, the entire ecological systems theory is based on. But even just moving this further, it's really to extend the conversation that you just began about the sociocultural aspects of living in Lagos, in Nigeria. So, and it's not just unique to Nigeria, it's the entire Africa, because Africa is very culture centered. So the question that I have, you've begun to talk about it, but maybe you just want to add something. That considering the nature and the sociocultural features of the Nigerian or African society, how has your work as a psychotherapist and wellness professional been received in Nigeria? I know some people will say, for example, why should I be speaking to her when I can just talk to my pastor?
Yep. Yep. We definitely still get that. Or like, I mean, clients have told me about like feeling judged by their friends. Like, why are you paying to talk to somebody? Why are you paying to talk to somebody about your feelings? So we definitely still have some of those mindsets. So I would say that, I mean, the reception is mixed, right? So there are people who, I've introduced myself as a therapist and they're like, so you just talk to people that are unstable, or, you talk to use Nigerian lingo, you talk to mad people, you know. So there's still some of that language and some of that reception. And then we also have people that are open to it. So by the time people come to us at Ibiayo, they're typically open to the therapeutic process, right? They may not understand all that the therapeutic process entails, but they're open to it. So whether it's at a recommendation from a family member, or they've seen us on socials, so Instagram or TikTok, but they're usually more open to the therapeutic process, and just seeing the benefits of seeing a therapist. They might not exactly be able to say that, oh, these are the benefits, but they just know, or it's been recommended to them that, okay, if you're having a difficult time, it might be helpful to speak to a therapist. And then we have people who are like, yeah, you know, I'll just pray about it, or I'll just talk to a friend or a family member, or talk to my pastor. And yeah, me being my client centered approach, it's, meeting them where they're at.
Mhm.
I'm still trying to explain the benefits and the differences of talking to a therapist versus talking to somebody within your social circle. And there are some people that don't even understand how the therapy process goes. So we're having to do psychoeducation to those people as well. So I would say that in summary, as a psychotherapist in Nigeria, just navigating those socioeconomic factors, there's a lot of psychoeducating that we have to do. So whether it's people that are coming to us seeking services, or they're already within the system, they're already clients, or people that don't appreciate or see the value in psychotherapy, we're having to just educate, and just teach people.
Thank you very much.
That's wonderful. I'm really enjoying this conversation that we're having. And as you were sharing, I was thinking about the other role of therapists is also in a lot of ways educators, where we are doing workshops and training and educating people about therapy, because there are these misconceptions. And I'm just curious as to the predominant demographic of people in Nigeria that seek your services, if you were to describe, who they are.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that from the demographic that we see a lot, I usually like to say that we see a lot of Gen Z and millennials. So
Mm,
think early career individuals, people that are just starting their career, are in the middle of their career, are transitioning from one career to the other, or transitioning from one phase of life to the other. So, from single to married, from married to having a child. So those are the demographic that we see a lot. We do tend to see some older individuals as well, and those individuals. So I would say like individuals in their 60s, yes, from like late 50s to 60s, and those individuals usually come at the recommendation of their children. So their
mm,
children have, encouraged them that it might be of benefit to speak to a professional. So if I were to put an age range around the people that we see, so I would say like from ages 23 to mid 40s, and then those older adults, like I mentioned as well, and then also adolescents. So we see adolescents from like ages 12 to 15 as well. In terms of just the gender background of our clients, we tend to see more women.
mhm.
And again, I think there are a lot of factors that go into this. I think one of those factors is like as a whole, women tend to take care of their health better, and tend to seek health services more. Um, and then the men that we do see, it's usually in recommendation from like a partner or a family member or someone within their circle as well.
It's very interesting because as you were saying that, I was thinking about also the demographic here in terms of, Nigerian Americans too, where it tends to
Mhm.
be the Gen Z, the millennials, going through life transitions. And then once in a while, they'll recommend to parents or
Yeah.
to, older adults in their family, and then they would seek out therapy. So it's really interesting the correlation
Yes.
between the two.
Yes.
When you said women tend to take better care of themselves than men, I laughed because it reminded me of sometime several years ago. I was speaking at the University of Minnesota,
Mhm.
and I was talking about the uh, psychological and socioeconomic effects of or implications of widowhood. And so I talked about how men tend to die. And before I even finished the statement, somebody in the audience screamed, yes, they kill us and then they live on. That's why women live longer. And I said, no, let's go back a little bit and talk about
Mhm.
how we men don't take great care of ourselves and how
Mhm.
we tend to live risky lives. It
Mhm.
was almost a funny, but just listening to you. And but there are some comments here. One comment, this is on YouTube. One says, this is an excellent topic and an important one for around this holiday season. Mental illness happens to all people, and we brown folks must get out of our heads about psychotherapy. I will have Dr. Togun Butler speak to that, but then there's another question. This is from Nigeria. It's also on YouTube. It says this conversation is very apt, especially in this part of the world where psychotherapy is in its infancy, and it's also unpopular. But so, Dr. Togun Butler, what I'd like you to talk about, I know that she has already alluded to that within the context of Nigeria, but I think it's broader than that. The
Mhm,
fact that those of us who are people of color
mhm.
who really, according to this person, need to get out of our heads about psychotherapy.
Yes, in answering that question, the first thing that comes to mind to me is very similar to what you had mentioned in line with that question is the whole idea of humanizing mental health. And when I talk about humanizing mental health, it's the realization that all of us, as part of being human, will deal with mental health issues from time to time. And when we humanize mental health, then we're more likely to speak about human health, mental health. And people realize that we're not alone in what we're going through. Because what I've noticed in my work is a lot of isolation, where because maybe of cultural issues or cultural factors, a lot of people struggle in silence because they feel ashamed or they're concerned about the stigma. So I believe if we humanize mental health, if we address the fact that all of us, by virtue of being humans, will struggle with mental health issues from time to time, then people are less likely to struggle in isolation and more likely to come forward and talk about what it is that they're going through. And also the idea of meeting people where they are, cultural factors. How do we combine culturally sensitive mental health practice where we meet people where they are? So that is why I work with pastors, where we talk about the fact that, yes, you can go to church, you love God, you love Jesus, and you can talk to your therapist about your mental health. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be one and the other. So the whole idea of working in collaboration by humanizing mental health is something that, I'm very passionate about. And I think, transcends a lot of cultural factors when we realize human beings will deal with mental health issues just like we deal with, physical issues.
Thank you very much for shedding more light on that. So what is the future, Ms. Ogunbamwo? What do you see as the future of psychotherapy and wellness in Nigeria? What does the future look like?
I think the future is, excuse me, I think the future is pretty bright. We get a lot of internship inquiries from people who are doing their bachelor's or they're doing their NYSC, their National Youth Service, and just looking for a place to do an internship for a year. So I think the future is very bright in that regard, in that we are having more individuals going to school for psychology degrees, wanting to just specialize in psychotherapy. So I'm very optimistic that it's a bright future. I know that there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of work to be done around just demystifying some of those myths that exist. I like what Dr. Shola just mentioned about, humanizing the therapy experience, the mental health experience. So there's a lot of work to be done, even at the grassroots level, right? Where, in communities where mental health is not understood, or communities where, they may not have access to a psychotherapist, who do they have access to? Right? It might be a community health center, a community health clinic. So just having options like a psychiatric nurse, or even training doctors that serve those communities to be able to identify some of those mental health issues so that they can refer out if needed. So the future is bright. There's a long road ahead and a lot of work to be done, but I'm very optimistic that, the future in mental health and just psychotherapy and wellness as a whole is a very bright one for Nigeria and Africa as a whole.
Yeah, it's very exciting to hear that. Because I guess my next question is in terms of all the great work that you're doing. How can people find you? How can they, collaborate with you? Or if somebody wants to make a referral, to your organization, to your agency, what ways can they go about doing that?
Yeah, we are very accessible online. So our website is ibio.com. That's IBIAYO.com. We offer something called a free 15-minute consultation, where individuals are able to just get a feel of what it's like to start therapy at IBIO, answer questions about the therapy process. And to book that, the booking link is on our website. It's plastered all over our website, so you can't really miss it. And then we also have our email on our website as well. We're very active on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. So those are just some ways that people can reach out to us. But we're very responsive. I have friends that have complained that, I reached out to a therapist and I did not get a response. So I really try to ensure that, we're responsive. So yes, ibio.com, that's IBIAYO.com is the best way to get in contact with us.
Wonderful.
Ibio means a place of joy.
Right. Yeah.
So how and why did you come up with that name?
Yeah. So when I was thinking of names, when I heeded to my sister's advice to start my practice, and I was thinking of names, I knew that I wanted a place to just embody what I wanted clients to feel, which is warmth, safety, and feeling like, they are safe in the environment. So I started brainstorming names. I kind of had an inclination that I wanted an ethnic name. I wanted a Yoruba name. So I was playing around with different names. One of the names I considered was Eniayo. And then I was talking to my brother, and he was like, how about you just call it Ibiayo, place of joy? And I was like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
So it just fit the mark. So shout out to my brother for helping me through
Yeah,
that
and
process.
yeah, tell your brother that he got some great support today.
Yes.
Because any area would mean a person, a happy person,
Yes,
Yeah.
a person of joy.
a person of joy. And EBIR really speaks to what we want the psychotherapy space to
Exactly.
be a place of comfort,
Mhm.
a non-judgmental zone, and that a place where you can feel safe.
Mhm.
Right. And so EBIO is just so apt. I have a few comments on Facebook. Sorry, on these are all on YouTube. I will just read all of them, and then I'll have then Dr. Togumbotla can ask another question.
Mhm.
One says, yes, yes, yes. We all have a mind, brain, and will at times struggle with our thoughts, beliefs, relationships, and life in general. We need to have more therapists that look like us, people of color.
Mm.
And then the other comment is, I find that here in the United States, Queens, New York to be exact, the high schools are more receptive to having mental health workshops and programs offered to their students. And then the other comment is, we conducted a 1 week long health and wellness week. We kicked off with mental health, and we did tapping, mindfulness, and meditation as a few exercises along with education on mental health. So then, Dr. Tukumbotla, there's another question that I could ask.
Sure.
The question just came through.
Okay.
It says, what are the common cultural beliefs about mental health that may affect the acceptance of psychotherapy practice in Nigeria?
Great question. I have had people share with me that it is seen as a sign of weakness, that if you're struggling with mental health issues, you're not strong enough. It is seen as demonic possession. So maybe you're possessed by demons and you just need to go to church and have it have the demons cast out. It's also the language around mental health, where you're seen as being crazy or weak, not resilient. So those tend to be the predominant stigma around mental health that I hear, or that the person is not going to get any better. They're going to have the diagnosis for life. This is a punishment for something that they have done. So now they are being punished, and that's why they're struggling with mental health issues. So those tend to be a lot of the stigma that I hear as a therapist when it comes to mental health. And somebody had asked or made a comment about therapy in terms of seeing people that look like you. And I find that to be very powerful, because I would say that was the reason when I started my practice that I was full within 2 to 3 months, because people felt like, as a Black woman, as an immigrant, as a Nigerian, you can relate to the impact that also racism, discrimination, oppression has on the mental health of, people of color in the United States. So I just wanted to point that out. That was an excellent point. And people's desire for mental health that is culturally competent and culturally sensitive.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, because I think that it took me a long time to begin to think also that representation does indeed matter.
Yes.
And so, Ms. Ogunbamwo, what do you hear from people in Nigeria?
I mean, Dr. Togumbotla already touched on almost everything that I hear. So there's a lot of like just tying it to religious issues. So either there's a demon, you just need to be delivered, or maybe you're not praying enough, or there's something wrong that you've done. Another thing that we see a lot is just the shame around it,
Yeah.
and just wanting to keep it hush hush. So we don't talk about that. We might have that family member that is not doing so well, that uncle that is not doing so well, but we don't really talk about it. So keeping that shame internally. But then if you are encountering that shame externally, so for example, like if somebody, let's say that a couple is dating, right? And they've gotten to the point of wanting to get married, and they find out that one of the partner's family members may have like some issues. It's like,
Mhm.
we don't want to be associated with that family, or like that's not a family that you want to marry into. So there's a lot of like just like shame around that. And just to speak to representation as well. So we also get to work with people virtually. So individuals in the diaspora that have immigrated. And one of the comments that we get a lot is just being able to speak to somebody that understands like the
Yes.
cultural factors and cultural nuances. In fact, I've had people like in therapy sessions switch between Pidgin and Yoruba, and just be able to speak comfortably,
Yeah.
and they just speak to just the freedom that comes with that. So representation really does matter.
Yeah, there are two things I like to do now, and we are going to be winding down in the next few minutes. Someone just made contact on LinkedIn and said, hey, we have a pool of patients actively searching for therapy services in your area. We've been driving 2 to 5 qualified patients per day to similar practices. Can yours handle more patients? If you are interested, we'd love to start. That's someone from LinkedIn who is watching. What I'll do is we can talk about
Mhm.
that, and then I will say yes to the person and make the connection. The other thing is that will, the person is from a company called Transforming Healthcare. Anyway, so I will reach out and we'll do that. But the other thing is that I know that Dr. Togun Butler was already planning to have a mental health conference in
Mhm.
Nigeria in the coming year.
Yeah.
So I always joke when I tell people that one of my jobs is to introduce people.
Mhm.
So except that today we are all of us are meeting for the first time.
Mhm.
But after this, I hope that the connection has been established. And so for that mental health conference, maybe you can work together.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yes. Yes, I've been working with other, Nigerians as well, trying to put together a mental health conference in Nigeria in 2026. We have not picked a date yet.
Okay.
And the reason that I became very passionate about that is people reaching out to me and saying, when are we going to bring a conference on mental health to Africa? I got that
Mhm.
all the time because I've been to conferences around the world, and I said it's time, to have a conference in Nigeria. So when I saw that you were going to be on the show, I was very excited, and I said I have to connect with her because
Yes.
to make this conference happen as part of the psychoeducation you mentioned earlier, to talk very openly,
Mhm.
about mental health, because I believe that the more we talk about it, the more we destigmatize mental health.
Mhm.
So hopefully we can collaborate on this conference that we're hoping to bring to Lagos, Nigeria in the year 2026.
Yes, I'm definitely open to speaking more and just bringing that vision to life.
Yes, thank you.
So I will send you to each other's email
Yes.
Yes, please.
address. And so before we end, I want you to say thank you to Miriam, your operations manager,
Okay.
who
I will.
has been, just working together with my coordinating,
Mm.
with my coordinating staff to put
Yeah.
this together. It's not easy because I know you're very busy. And we actually initially scheduled this for the 28th, but then
Mhm.
things came up for you,
Yeah.
and then we had to put it, yeah, because you're very busy. I am very busy. And so
Yes.
our staff were email back and forth. There were like
Yes,
20
we did.
something email. I was looking
I
at the
saw
email.
that.
Yes, I was looking at the emails. There were 20 something emails back and forth. And so
Mhm.
just putting it together, I am really grateful.
Yeah.
I will have Dr. Togun Butler talk us out. But before then, I want to ask you, what message do you have for younger Nigerians who may be interested in becoming psychotherapists and or wellness professionals?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for accommodating the rescheduling. I just wanted to say that. And the message that I have to younger Nigerians that want to become psychotherapists and wellness professionals is that it's possible, right? The road ahead might seem unclear. It might seem like there are lots of question marks or even hurdles that are in front of you, but it's possible. It's very possible to have a fulfilling career in psychotherapy or in the wellness space where you are helping individuals and also you are developing as a professional. I know that one of the questions and also concerns that I had was, I mean, is this a profitable career, right? Because we have to be real, profits are a thing to consider. And I will answer by saying that yes, it is. It's very, very possible to have a fulfilling career, connect with people, ask questions. Don't be afraid to, reach out. We have a lot of like cold emails from people just asking questions, and we try our best to respond. So just get as much information as you need, but know that it's very possible to have a fulfilling career in psychotherapy and wellness in the Nigerian space.
I'm sorry. When I said, I will say this, and then Dr. Ogunbamwo will talk us out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that if you don't mind, we will need a few more minutes because two more questions just came through on Facebook that I think, sorry, also on YouTube. YouTube has been very busy, that I think are very important. One of them is, how do you manage emotional turmoil, emotional burnout? It's important. How do you manage
Yes.
emotional burnout or compassion fatigue while providing consistent care for your clients? Because whenever I tend to lend people a shoulder or a listening ear, I sometimes get overwhelmed. And this is not a therapist. So this person is wondering how you are dealing with all of this. That's one question. After you answer that, I'll ask the second one, unless you want me to just ask and you too. Okay, go ahead. Deal with that.
Okay, yeah, let me just respond now. So, emotional burnout and compassion fatigue is very real. And even just burnout as a whole, as a mental health provider, is very real. This hits home because just a few months ago, I was experiencing burnout and really had to just lean in on my support system and also just practice what I preach, right? But I would say that managing the emotional turmoil and compassion fatigue that comes from just listening to someone is remembering that one of the things about empathy is being able to put yourself in people's shoes, but those shoes are not yours, right? So being able to recognize that, okay, this is somebody else's story. I'm there to support. But this isn't my story to take on. Because if I take it on and I let it sit on me, then I'm not able to be there for myself. I'm not able to function in the best ways for myself and also to them if they need my support. So, whether it's having to just distinguish between like listening to someone, and if you find yourself thinking about what has been told to you, maybe doing things like journaling or even talking to another person about it. I know that's something that is really helpful for me is supervision. So peer supervision is very, very helpful for me. Just being able to talk to my colleagues, getting tips for them and from them rather, and also just having a space where I can process, what it is that I'm experiencing within sessions. But yeah, just being able to recognize that someone else's story isn't yours to take on and to, weigh on yourself. And it might sound easier said than done. But if you remind yourself that, okay, I'm here to listen, I'm here to support, I'm not here to take on, it can hopefully help with just dealing with the compassion fatigue.
Right. Think that is wonderful. Dr. Togun Butler, I don't want you to chip in because We can talk about compassion fatigue and burnout for the entire month. and, but it's also one reason why I have tremendous respect from you, Mr. Ogunbamwo, because
Yeah.
you're practicing this in a tough society.
Yeah.
Tough because of all of the other challenges that have to do with everything else in
Life.
that space. In that space. And
Yeah.
so the next question is, how do advancements in technology, such as telehealth, impact your ability to provide effective treatment, and what challenges come with it? Dr. Tukumbatla, you may also want to chip in on this because you practice telehealth. I
Yes.
do too. In fact,
Mhm.
now all of my practice is telehealth. But
Wow.
yes, my entire practice is telehealth now. And so, Mr. Govanwo, you should respond first, and then I'll ask.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so telehealth, I mean, it has its amazing pros, right? I mean, I mentioned being able to support clients that are in the diaspora, so clients that were not in the same country or same location, but even clients that might be in Nigeria but were in different parts of Nigeria. So, I mean, Lagos, we have clients that we see from Abuja, Ibadan, different places, right? So it just bridges that gap. And then also, I mean, like we've said, life in Lagos can be stressful, right? So telehealth can take away some of that burden that may come with having to go to, excuse me, having to go to a physical location. So experiencing things like traffic or being in a different part of the city. So it can definitely alleviate some of those challenges that come with providing mental health services. It has its cons though. So some of the cons are, obviously being distracted. We I mean, everyone works virtually now. So we're used to, either having like two browsers open or two screens open, two screens in front of us. So I've had times where I've had to like call out clients like, hey, it doesn't look like you're very engaged in the session right now. So being able to just bring them back to the therapy space. So it has its pros and its cons. And interestingly enough, we have people who do prefer to come in person. So majority of our practice is also virtual, but we still have those individuals that prefer to come in person because it helps to somewhat serve as like I don't want to call it a distraction, but like just being able to have a physical space that they can actually like unburden and having like space between their home, especially people who work from home. So sometimes like coming to therapy might be like their outing for the week, right? And just being able to interact with a person in person. But yeah, telehealth, it has its amazing pros and also some cons that we have to navigate through.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that's quite exhaustive. You mentioned Ibadan, and Dr. Togun Butler's father, when she was born, was a
Mhm.
psychiatrist at Ibadan. And
Mhm.
so this is what Dr. Togun Butler, I would like you to go to this, because
Mhm.
right now I just feel like sort of, just I'm filled with excitement and
Mhm.
humbled by the fact that we have just got a message from Dr. Sam Aikoje, based at Ibadan. I have read his
Mm.
book. He's one of Nigeria's foremost gerontologists right now.
Okay. Mhm.
He just wrote, he said, basic healthcare in Nigeria is a huge challenge in terms of access and
Mhm.
affordability. There are not enough professionals to render service. The
Mhm.
future is an issue of concern.
Mhm.
I'm actually just excited that he's watching us. And that's the time to also comment. I feel very,
Mhm.
we, you know,
Absolutely. I do agree that access to healthcare, as mental health is healthcare, continues to be a concern in Nigeria. My dad was a psychiatrist when he was in Nigeria in Ring Road Hospital. I still remember because he used to take us all the time when we were little. And he talked about difficulty accessing healthcare and accessing mental health. So I do agree that part of the work that we need to do is to make access to mental health more accessible. And in what ways do we do that? How do we identify those challenges and then develop a plan to overcome those challenges? Because again, I left Nigeria, I think it was 1988. It's a long time. And even then, my dad was very vocal about, difficulty accessing mental health, difficulty accessing healthcare. So that's why I'm so excited about this conversation, because it really tunes into the future. Like, what can we do to continue to have this conversation? And also, what can we do grassroots work to make sure that healthcare and mental health, also being a part of healthcare, is accessible to all people who need it, and we're able to overcome these barriers.
Two more things.
Sure.
A psychotherapist here in the United States just wrote that was an extremely helpful response regarding burnout and compassion fatigue. These are challenges that I face and struggle with. Thank you. But in terms of, Dr. Togun-Butler, you ended by saying, what do we do, going forward, which speaks to what Dr. Onieseleh, the gerontologist, said in his comment. But I think that we may be getting somewhere. One is that we have Ms. Ogunbamwo, who is doing such tremendous work in Nigeria. And then we just have a comment from a professor of linguistics at Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Nigeria. She wrote, "It will be great to organize a conference on mental health in 2026 in Nigeria." It's a good development that's long overdue. So maybe her university is vying to host it. So, yeah. But this has been a great conversation. And now, Dr. Togun-Butler, you can talk us out. And Ms. Ogunbamwo, I can't thank you enough.
Yes, absolutely. This has been an amazing conversation that we've had. As Nigerians, we have a lot of love for Nigeria, and seeing what we can do to continue to make mental health services accessible, affordable for Nigerians. And just like I mentioned earlier, it's really looking at the future. And I feel like this conversation is rooted in what we're doing now and what we can continue to do. And, Ms. Ogunbamwo, I really appreciate you coming here and telling us about what you're doing in Nigeria. And I just love the name, Ibiayo, just a place of joy, because we talk about therapy, creating that safe space that we can come and share what we're going through without judgment. Talking about some of the mental health stigma and what we're doing to challenge that stigma by having this conversation, by doing workshops, and hopefully bringing this conference in 2026 with the goal of making sure it's not the last, that we continue this work that we're doing. So I just want to thank you so much, for coming and sharing with us, and, just being part of what's going on in Nigeria, and also looking, towards the future as well. So, thank you again, for your time and for the conversation.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. And in front of the whole world, with so many people watching us from all over on multiple platforms. So, Dr. Togun-Butler, do you promise to co-facilitate more like this with me?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I love this. I love to have conversations around mental health. So absolutely. And thank you for having me co-facilitate, because I reached out to you and then right away you were like, okay, you're going to be the co-host. So thank you so much.
You did not say no. And so, Mr. Ogunbamwo, she has expressed our gratitude. And I think that she has expressed it not just on behalf of both of us, but on behalf of so many people. We appreciate what you're doing. And she and I will continue to stay in contact.
Yes, please.
And do you promise that this will not be the last time that you come to this space?
Oh, I promise. I promise. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been an honor to be here and to just have this conversation. I'm excited for more conversations like this, and also the conference with Dr. Togun-Butler. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And have a good night in Nigeria. Yeah. For us, it's early yet.
Have a good afternoon.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.